Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are standing on the edge of a cliff. Historically speaking, anyway, we're looking at one of the most uh, jarring transitions in modern
It
history.
really is.
Just picture the scene. It's 1945. Second World War is finally over. The Nazis are defeated. Japan has surrendered. And there are, literal parties in the streets.
A moment of just absolute euphoria. The Grand Alliance, the U.S., the Soviet Union, and Great Britain had done the impossible. They'd saved the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The assumption was, okay, now we rebuild together.
We stay friends.
But, and there's always a but, fast forward just 12 months, 1 year. We're in 1946, and that hope, it's completely gone.
Shattered. The alliance is just shattered into a million pieces.
And the world has split into two armed, hostile camps. For everyone listening, and especially for our ID history learners out there, that's our big question today.
Yeah.
Why? Why had the Grand Alliance broken down so completely by 1946?
It is the ultimate friends to enemies arc. And to understand it, you have to get into the friction. We've pulled together a stack of sources today that really get under the skin of this breakup secret, diplomatic cables, military stats, details on political manipulation, some incredibly heated speeches.
We're going to talk about salami tactics, which sounds like a lunch order, but is actually terrifying.
Right, and the war of wires.
But let's start with the big picture, the board game, so to speak. When the dust settled in 1945, who was actually left standing?
That is the perfect place to start. The sources call this the emergence of superpowers in a power vacuum. Think about a room after a huge bar fight. Most of the furniture is smashed. The old heavy hitters, Germany, Japan, they're just knocked out cold.
And you'd think Britain and France are, celebrating. They won.
Right. Technically, yes. But the sources are pretty brutal here. They describe them as powers of the second rank.
Second rank. Ouch. That has to sting.
But it's the reality. The war had completely hollowed them out. France had been occupied. Britain was basically bankrupt. Its empire was already starting to crumble.
So they just didn't have the muscle anymore.
Not at all. So you have this huge, empty space, a power vacuum, and only two giants were big enough to fill it.
The United States and the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And the stats on it from the sources are just wild. On the U.S. side, you've got 12 million men in uniform,
Yeah.
over 70,000 naval vessels,
Yeah.
and of course the atomic bomb.
The military power is one thing, but the economic data is what's really crucial here. The war didn't destroy the American economy.
No, it supercharged it.
It supercharged it. U.S. industry doubled in size. They were holding 2/3 of the world's gold. So mentally, the U.S. is looking outward. They're confident. They want an open world.
What does that mean? Open world.
Free trade, access to markets, organizations like the IMF. They want to sell their refrigerators and cars to everybody.
Okay, so the U.S. is feeling confident, ready to do business. What about the Soviets?
A completely different story. Just the total opposite. The source mentions an interview with Stalin where he drops this one number that just stops you in your tracks. 7 million.
That's the casualty figure.
That's the figure he used for Soviet deaths. Now, we know today the real number was much higher, maybe 20 million or more, but he used that 7 million figure to justify everything.
The country was just devastated.
Utterly. Towns destroyed, industry in ruins. So while the U.S. is thinking about opportunity, the Soviets are thinking about one thing.
Survival.
Security. Obsessive security. They didn't want an open world. They wanted a buffer zone. They wanted to make sure no one could ever march through Poland and burn Moscow again.
So you've got these two giants. One wants to open all the doors, and the other wants to triple lock them.
Yeah, and that is a recipe for trouble. And that trouble starts on the ground immediately.
Which brings us to that phrase I mentioned, salami tactics. It was coined by the Hungarian communist leader, Matyas Rákosi. Is it as cynical as it sounds?
It's incredibly cynical. Rákosi basically explained that you don't take over a country in one big bite. You slice off the opposition, piece by piece, like a salami, until there's nothing left.
Okay, so walk me through the steps. If I'm living in Poland or Hungary in 1946, what am I actually seeing?
Well, stage one seems pretty normal. The Soviets would help create a broad coalition government, an anti-fascist alliance. They'd invite everyone, Democrats, socialists, peasant parties. Let's all work together.
That sounds reasonable. It even sounds, democratic.
And that's the trap, because once they're in the door, stage two begins. The slicing.
Ah.
You start accusing the strongest non-communist leaders of being fascist sympathizers or foreign spies. You use the secret police, which the communists always made sure they controlled, to arrest them, intimidate them.
And stage three?
That's the end game. You've sliced everyone else away, you merge what's left into a single front controlled by the communists, and you install what the sources call the baggage train leaders.
The baggage train. I love that image. I'm guessing it refers to how they got there?
Exactly. These weren't locals. These were men like Boleslaw Bierut in Poland or Rákosi himself in Hungary. They'd spent the whole war in Moscow being trained by Stalin.
So they were literally in the baggage train of the Red Army.
Waiting to be unpacked and put in charge. They were Moscow's men through and through.
And the sources really highlight Poland as a major flashpoint.
Right.
Why Poland specifically?
Well, remember, Britain went to war in 1939 to defend Polish independence. Now, in 1946, the West is watching that same independence just evaporate. The Polish elections in January 47 were a complete farce.
The numbers are shocking. It says nearly 1 million voters were just scrubbed from the register.
Yes. And over 100 opposition candidates were arrested before the vote even happened. To the West, this was an absolute betrayal of what Stalin had promised at the Yalta Conference.
Which was free and fair elections.
Right. But from the Soviet perspective, they saw it as necessary. They argued these opposition parties were anti-Soviet, a threat. So installing a friendly government wasn't expansionism.
It was insurance.
It was insurance.
Okay, so Poland is the big friction point in Europe. But the sources point to something that happened even earlier, down in the Middle East, the Iran crisis.
Yes, and this was the first real breach of trust. During the war, the Allies had occupied Iran for the oil. They had a written agreement. 6 months after the war ends, everyone goes home.
The British left, the Americans left.
But the Soviets stayed. Stalin kept 30,000 troops in northern Iran. He wanted oil concessions, and he was actively encouraging a communist uprising there.
And there was a deadline, right? January 1st, 1946.
And he blew right past it, refused to withdraw. It actually took a formal complaint to the brand new United Nations to force him out. And for President Truman, this was a watershed moment.
How so?
It proved you couldn't trust Stalin's handshake. He would only back down if you pushed him hard.
So, if you're a Western leader in 1946, you're seeing salami tactics in Europe, Soviet troops in Iran. You start to wonder, is this going to spread?
That is the fear of contagion.
Right.
Exactly. The U.S. didn't see these as isolated incidents. They saw a pattern. They looked at Greece and Turkey, where there were communist-led rebellions, and they just assumed Moscow was pulling the strings.
And it wasn't just on the borders, was it? We're talking about France and Italy, too.
This is the part people often forget. In 1946, France and Italy were economically ruined. People were starving. And when you're hungry, the promise of communism is very, very appealing.
And the communist parties there were huge.
Massive. They were winning elections. And the U.S. suspected they were getting their orders straight from Moscow.
And were they?
Well, their suspicions were confirmed a bit later. The sources mention the creation of Cominform in 1947, which was literally an organization to coordinate all the communist parties in Europe. To the West, this looked like a global conspiracy.
So the physical situation is getting worse. But what I find most fascinating here is the war of wires. We actually get to see the secret telegrams the diplomats were sending home.
This is the psychological breakdown. These telegrams are the intellectual engine of the Cold War. The first big one is the Long Telegram from February 1946 by George Kennan.
He was the U.S. diplomat in Moscow. What was he telling Washington?
Well, before this, Washington was confused. They were asking, why are the Soviets so difficult? Can't we make a deal? And Kennan writes back and essentially says, stop trying to apply your own logic to them.
He has that famous line, the Soviets are impervious to the logic of reason.
Impervious to the logic of reason, but highly sensitive to the logic of force. That's the key line. Kennan argued the Soviet Union needed an external enemy to justify its own brutal regime. So no matter how nice the U.S. was, the Soviets would always see them as a threat.
So negotiation is pointless.
Exactly. Kennan said you can't talk them out of it. You can only contain them, meet them with force at every point. And this telegram, it basically becomes the Bible for U.S. foreign policy.
But it wasn't a one-way street. This is the real aha moment for me in the sources. The Soviets were doing the exact same thing.
The exact same thing. In September 1946, the Soviet ambassador in Washington, Nikolai Novikov, sends his own telegram back to Stalin.
The Novikov telegram.
And it is an almost perfect mirror image. Novikov looks at the U.S. and he doesn't see a defender of freedom. He sees an empire striving for world supremacy.
He points to the U.S. building military bases everywhere.
Iceland, the Pacific, all over. He points to the massive navy. He tells Stalin they are preparing for war against us. They want to dominate the world.
So it's this tragic feedback loop.
It is. Kennan tells the U.S., they're aggressive, be tough. Novikov tells the USSR, they're aggressive, be tough.
And every move the other side makes is seen as proof.
Precisely. If the U.S. sends food aid, it's dollar imperialism. If the Soviets secure a border, it's an invasion. Once that psychological concrete hardens, the alliance is dead.
Which brings us to the public breakup, the big speech. Fulton, Missouri, March 1946.
Winston Churchill, the Iron Curtain speech.
And the setting is key. He's in America, with President Truman sitting right behind him on stage. And he just drops this line. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
He's basically saying out loud everything we've just been talking about. The salami tactics, the control of Eastern Europe. He's telling the world, the war isn't over. We just have a new enemy.
And how did the Soviets take it? We have an interview Stalin gave to the newspaper Pravda just a week later.
He was absolutely furious. I mean, Churchill and Stalin had been allies. Now, Stalin goes on the record and compares Churchill directly to Hitler.
That's the ultimate insult, especially in 1946.
It's explosive. Stalin argues that Churchill is pushing a racial theory that English-speaking nations should rule the world. He says it's just like Nazism.
And he doubles down again on that security argument, doesn't he?
He does. He basically asks his readers, we lost 7 million people. Is it really so surprising that we want loyal governments on our borders? He frames the Iron Curtain not as a prison wall, but as a shield.
We have these two cartoons in the source stack that just capture this split reality perfectly. The Soviet one.
It shows Churchill holding a flag over Europe, but his shadow is the silhouette of Hitler. The message is, you're just the new fascists.
And the Western view.
It shows Churchill crouching down, trying to peek under this heavy, dark wall labeled Iron Curtain. He looks concerned, trying to see what's happening to the people on the other side.
So one side sees a shield, the other sees a prison.
And those two views were totally incompatible.
So to bring this all back to our mission today, why did the Grand Alliance break down by 1946? It really wasn't one thing.
No, it was a perfect storm. First, the power vacuum. The old world was gone, only two giants were left. Second, the actions on the ground, salami tactics, Iran, that just destroyed all trust.
And third, that war of wires.
The telegrams. The telegrams gave both sides the intellectual permission to just stop trying. Once your own experts tell you the other side is impervious to reason and wants world supremacy, well, there's no going back.
It's a sobering look at how fast a narrative can take hold. Before we sign off, though, I want to leave everyone with a final thought based on that mirror image idea.
This is the question that really sticks with me from these sources.
Go on.
Both Kennan and Novikov accuse the other side of wanting to rule the world. The Americans thought the Soviets were plotting global conquest. The Soviets thought the Americans were plotting global domination.
So the question is, were they right? Or were they just projecting?
Exactly. When you become a superpower, does your own ambition make you assume that everyone else is just as ambitious?
Yeah.
Did the Cold War happen because of what the other side actually did, or because of what each side feared the other was capable of?
A little geopolitical psychology for you to mull over. That's it for this deep dive into the breakdown of 1946. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.